Episode 3, we've got Sam Gibson. Sam, thanks for doing this, mate. I really appreciate it. I think I'm excited about this one because I've realised recently that I'm an emotional eater. I didn't think I was before, but when I've thought about it, I snack a lot when I'm bored, and I tend to seek like comfort foods when I'm stressed. So I'm assuming that's an emotional eater, is it?
Pretty much, mate. I mean, I'll hold my hand up as well, Dan. So am I. I think all of us are
Yeah,
emotional eaters to a degree because think about it, right? Eating was our first ever coping mechanism. Baby cried, mum fed baby, baby felt comforted. It's like it's the most natural way to seek comfort. So it doesn't necessarily mean you've got a full-blown eating disorder, but I would say everyone is an emotional eater under certain circumstances to a degree. So yeah, I don't think you're alone in that realization.
yeah, that's not so bad then. But I'm gonna just start by asking the question that everyone listening is probably going to be thinking, like, what is an emotional eating coach? What is it that you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll tell you how I kind of started off and how I become an emotional eating coach, you know. So it's definitely like a sub niche within the fitness industry, of course. A lot of it is very, very similar. You're helping people with a diet, with that exercise habits, with that all health and wellness habits, because that all does play a role in the physical results that they get. But I exclusively work with people who've maybe tried the traditional ways of losing weight, eating habits, healthy eating, all that sort of stuff. And they've realized that there's actually something psychological going on, whether it's just using food for comfort, snacking when they're bored, or using it as a stress relief, and that's stopping them from being able to get the results that they want, or if it's maybe a bit more of a full-blown kind of disordered eating, I work with those kinds of people. So my job is to kind of do a bit of a psychoanalysis to understand why is someone struggling with their relationship with food. Coincidentally enough, shameless plug, that's the name of my book, Why You Overeat and How to Stop for Good. So it's taking a look at the deep dive into the mindset about how emotional eating is possible, how overeating is possible, other forms of disordered eating, and what's going on underneath the habits, as in the psychology. So I coach people on their eating habits and the diet and their training, but with a hybrid into the mindset stuff around eating habits. So it's like an online coach or a coach, so to speak, but we're not just focused on like, right, did you hit your calories today? Are you losing weight? Are you hitting your exercise plan? It's a little bit of that, and then it's the mindset. So it's almost 50-50 between helping people with the habits, achieving their lifestyle goals, but also working on their eating habits and that food psychology, that relationship with food.
Yeah. Do you find they've normally tried other options? Do you find they've normally tried and failed multiple diets and stuff before they come to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's literally the conversation I have with most people. It's like, I've tried everything, and
Yeah.
something you've said, Sam, has resonated with me. Maybe I am an emotional eater, and, maybe approaching my weight loss goals long term from this angle is actually the better thing. And because I truly believe that until you're actually able to lose weight and keep it off, you have to know why you are overweight and needing to lose weight in the first place. Like, you've got to figure out why. And just going on a diet doesn't address the why. It's more like a temporary change. So what we're trying to do is create long-term behavior change through psychology. And then I always say this, your body is just a physical manifestation of your mindset. So a lot of people would have lost weight because they've temporarily went on some sort of plan, some sort of regimen. They mustered enough willpower and motivation to stick to it for X amount of time. But then because their psychology hasn't changed, eventually they just kind of went back to where they were, and hence the term yo-yo dieting. So my kind of ideal client, or the people who reach out to me and say, oh, you're the ideal coach for me, are normally people who've been yo-yo dieting for years. And I think until they've had that experience, they probably wouldn't be willing to listen to even some of the things I'm talking about, because most people, and it's not being condescending, this is actually human nature. It's us as well. We want things now, and we're quite impatient. We're impulsive humans. We don't want to work hard for things. Like, why would we? The brain's not designed for that. It wants what it wants. So I think you have to kind of go through a few failures around diets before you're actually even willing to contemplate, oh, maybe there is something psychologically going on.
Yeah.
So I do think you have to fail before you actually even want to enter my world, even if that's just emotionally, by like understanding the podcast and wanting to buy the book. A lot of
Yeah.
people would say, oh, I'm just overweight. I just need to go on a diet. I don't need to know why I overeat. I just need to stick to it. And I'm like, okay, I get it. They're just not ready for the deeper information yet, you know?
Yeah. Is that would you say that's one of the most common struggles you've come across, like the
It's half the
mindset
battle,
side
Dan.
of it? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's half the battle. Now, I always say this to my clients, you cannot, don't get me wrong, you can read this book and get great insights, but this isn't going to lose the weight for you. You've got to
Yeah.
put the work in. So like I said, to answer the question about coaching, what I do and how I help people, it's like, right, let's focus on the actual behaviors, becoming the person that you want to do, habit stacking, habit formation, all the things around strategy and creating a plan. And that includes your gym and your diet. That's 50% of the work. The other 50% is understanding what's holding me back from being able to do that. So just the fitness industry without the mindset work, it doesn't work. And, you probably relate to this now. Obviously, we're on the same male mentoring program, and we know it's like business for a mindset for business owners. Well, mine's mindset for people who want to lose weight. It's the hybrid of like, yeah, you've got to be able to, walk the walk, but like you've got to understand what's going to potentially hold you back. So it's the hybrid of mindset and health together that creates the best
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah, there's only one thing holding you back, and that's you, innit? That's yeah, your mindset. So like every time I hear you speak, Sam, like I've listened to you on a few podcasts recently, and I'm always like impressed at how you can like recall information and stuff. Um, have you got like some sort of like formal education background, or are you pretty much like self-taught and that?
I mean, I went to university, I've got degrees, but what I do
Nothing to
now
do with
was
it.
nothing to do with that. It was a basic like sports science thing where, you do a bit of nutrition, a bit of sports psychology, a bit of like exercise physiology, anatomy and that. It was just a general sports science degree. So basically self-taught by just reading, by writing, by being on loads of personal development programs myself. And, and I always say this, of course, I'm a bit buzzing to be a published author now, self-published, of course. But this book, I didn't really write this book. I just collected amazing information through my own experience and then retold the story in my own words. And that's all a good story is. No one reinvents the wheel, Dan. I've just picked loads of information and I name drop so many people in here like, oh, this quote I got from like Johann Hari, he's a favorite author of mine. And I talk about, where is it? It's on that shelf somewhere. How to Be the Love That You Seek, by Nicole LePera. She's like a holistic psychologist, talks about how childhood trauma kind of impacts our personality as an adult. And so many people are trying to like alter their behavior without going deeper into their identity, which is actually formed from their childhood. So I've just been doing this for like, I started my personal development journey in like 2018. I talk about it in the book. Definitely had my own disordered eating issues and a lot of mental health issues at the time. I wouldn't want to admit that, but now I did. Like, many young men, hopefully listening to this right now that can look back and say like, yeah, I did struggle as a teenager, as a man in my early 20s, and like, I'm glad I figured it out. So through my own experiences and information that I picked up, I was like, I've got a really good idea. I'm going to put it all in a book, So I haven't got a formal education. It's just through my own experience. And also the lucky fact that I've worked with 2,000 women in the past 9-year coaching. It's almost like I've had my own formal education in the form of real life. I've had my own 2,000 test subjects who I've been able to like see what works and see what doesn't. So there's no piece of paper that can give you like real world knowledge. That has to come from reality, from lived
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, definitely. Was there a moment that you decided that that's what you want? This is what you wanted to do, or was it something you just sort of fell into like gradually? Or
Bit of both. That's a really good question. So in 2019, I was a personal trainer. I was doing very, very well. I would say for a short amount of time, maybe a year, 18 months, I was the most sought after personal trainer in my town. And, really took off out of nowhere. That was my like first success that I had as a business, was like a fully booked personal training business where it was just me in the gym, but I was doing 10, 12 clients a day, 6 days a week, and I was getting really good transformational results. But then some of the same clients who had, let's say, trained for a 12-week holiday, right? They wanted to go on holiday. They wanted to lose 2 stone for a holiday. So I get them in shape. And then 3 months later, they'd be like, Sam, I've lost it all. I need to come back. And obviously at the time I was like, oh, right, I've got another client. I'll work with them again. I quite enjoyed coaching them. But then that happened 2 or 3, or sometimes clients would come back like a 4th time for another 8-week program. And I'm starting to scratch my head going, something wrong here, So I talk about this a lot in the book, and that's when I started like thinking there's something deeper here. The same people are struggling with the same things I did back in the day, the mindset. I mean, even when I was at that gym, Dan, I was talking to them, and what they'd be ranting and raving about was about their life, was about their relationships, was about their struggles, their mental health problems, their anxiety. And, oh, I binged last night, Sam, because I was so anxious about work. And so I'm like hearing all of this and going like, I've thought all these things, and now I'm hearing them from the clients I teach. And I felt like a little bit of a fraud if I knew like 90% of people who lose weight, this is a real study, 90% of people who lose weight gain it all back within 12 months or less. That's a study by Marshall S. Runge. People can go and research that. So it means diet culture is just like, a revolving door. Gym culture is like a revolving door. You come in, you get your transformation, you leave, and you come back. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to play a role in that. However, as you can imagine, having a really successful business and being very sought after, I kind of put that at the back of my mind. Why would I rock the boat? Why would I change it? I'm doing well. So I kind of forgot about it. And then lockdown hit, right? I was forced to go, what am I going to do? I can't train people in the gym. So that's when this kind of forced me. And in the space of 2 or 3 months, I'd managed to kind of basically rebuild my business from scratch, no longer do personal training, but I was helping people with their weight loss online with this whole mindset approach. And then when lockdown ended, I never went back because I realized this was not only a better business, but it was actually more authentic, and it made me sleep better at night knowing that I was having a bigger impact, because I started to feel a bit guilty, like the same person's come back for another 8-week personal training program when they've lost this same weight 3 times, and I've got to stand there with them and be like, oh yeah, this is the last time for sure. And I just felt a bit like it was a lot of conflict. I don't know how else to describe it, because on the one hand, I'm like, well, I've got to pay my bills and I want to build my own business. And I don't think it's selfish to say that. I'm only providing a service that people want. But I was also like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I just don't feel, it left a bad taste in my mouth. So I had inklings of wanting to do this, but I was also forced into it by the lockdown. And if that never happened, I might not have been brave enough to ever take the plunge.
Yeah. Aye, class. I think it's mad. But you've just done it there. Like I see, I've listened to you on a few podcasts recently, and you can like recite information like really well. And it's just like, I don't know why. Like I can read a book, and if you asked us about it half an hour later, I couldn't tell you anything about it. Whereas I first heard you on Adam. It's the Above Average podcast when you were talking about Johan Hari's book Lost Connections. Which I'd downloaded because I'd listened to him on Joe Rogan and I think it was Chris Williamson's podcast a couple of years ago, but I never got around to reading it. And then I heard you talking about it on that podcast, and the way you are able to like recall the information and stuff, I thought was incredible. So it encouraged me to go and read that book. And like I say, I've read it and I understand some of the stuff. And then when I hear stuff, like I'll hear stuff on podcast or I'll hear people talking about stuff, and I'll think to myself like, oh yeah, I heard that in that book, or I read that in that book, but I can never recall the information the way that you can. Do you know what I mean? Do you think that's something? Do you think that's because you do it like? Do you do it regularly, or do you think, have you always been able to just? You always been good at recalling information?
Yeah, it's another really good question. So I'm not into this whole labeling culture that we are now about people saying they're ADHD and I'm this and I'm that. 'Cause I honestly think some people, not all, please do not put words in my mouth, use that as a crutch, as an excuse, right?
Yeah,
I know for a fact I've got some sort of like ADHD, right? Because even if I think back at school, I'd feel physically in pain sitting in a maths class, right?
Yeah.
And I would like literally be naughty just to get kicked out because I hated it. And like you said there, but I can't recall anything I wasn't interested in. It was like my brain's a sieve. I'm like a goldfish, right? But anything that I had a remote amount of curiosity or interest in, I seem to have this skill of being able to retain it really well. And it wasn't until I literally become like 29, 30, like I'm 31 now, the last 2 or 3 years, I'm like, I'm probably ADHD, aren't I? Because there's so many other things. And I'm like, you know what? I'm actually going to use that as a superpower. I don't know if you've heard of Robert Little. He's from our neck of the woods.
Yeah.
I think you do. Yeah, he's got his book out at the minute. ADHD is a superpower. He's actually great to speak at my next event, so I'm buzzing about that. And he's singing from that hymn sheet as well. It's like, you might be, but let's use it to your advantage. So I'm like, you know what? It's certainly been disadvantages as well. I definitely think that's related to the emotional eating and the alcohol and drugs in my younger years. I definitely used to self-medicate because I just couldn't understand what was going on in here. And I found that when I'm deeply interested in something, it's like I come alive. And when I'm not interested in something, I become a bit more introverted and a bit like a shell and a bit more withdrawn. So I've just learned what ticks, what makes me tick. And education is always something that can make me tick, anything I'm interested in. So yes, I always have been able, I just didn't notice it. I always have been able to retain a lot of information, but with only things I'm interested in. Not things I'm not interested in.
Yeah. I'm a bit like that. I think like you say, I think it's possible that I've got ADHD, but I'm not. I'm not interested in getting a diagnosis. It wouldn't change anything in my life. You know what I mean? So, but I'm like that when I get into something, I get obsessed with it. But I'm not very good at recalling it. But I think it's down to the fact that I don't use it. It is. Yeah. I mean, we've done a lot. Obviously, like you were saying before about the program that we're in, Paul taught a lot of the Joe Dispenza stuff. And when he talks about the neural pathways and stuff, like I learned a lot about that. I've done a lot of reading into Joe Dispenza's stuff and the myelin and how it like reinforces, like the more you use it, it makes them neural pathways like quicker. The more reps you do, like repetition is the mother of all skill.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm a bit like that. But I was gonna, when it's interesting that you mentioned about the eating and the like the ADHD and stuff, because I was gonna ask about that. Like my lass tells us all the time that she thinks I'm autistic, but my son's autistic, and he's got like. Have you ever had any clients that have like autism or anything like that?
I, I
Just
would say, I wouldn't want to say half, but I would say 20 or 30%, a sizable chunk, a noticeable enough chunk, have either got, yeah, mainly ADHD, but I have had some autistic clients as well.
yeah,
Any kind of neurodiversity, because there is a sensory aspect. This is the
that's
thing
what I was
that
gonna
I think
say.
you're
Yeah,
about to get onto.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just eating for comfort. It's a sensory seeking behavior. So if you have, whatever wiring you do, like people who are ADHD or autistic, they're not broken. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just wired a little bit differently. And that's often the shape of nature and nurture. It could be a bit of trauma response, genetics, certain environmental factors. It can be a combination of many things. So the wiring's a little bit different. This is the way I understand myself. But people who are literally like wired like that, they'll have like superpowers, but they'll also have like weaknesses as well. And
yeah,
that can be a little bit of emotional regulation skills. Like even now, if I'm in a loud restaurant, Dan, and I'm not like at the back of the restaurant where I know the back's there, I'm a bit dysregulated and I feel like there's too many voices in my head and I can't get comfortable. So I know there's some weird things that I've got, like sensory issues. So
yeah,
sensory seeking behaviors are anything where we're self-soothing. That could be food, it could be alcohol, it could be touch, it could be like a sensory seeking behavior for, let's say, someone who's like autistic. It could be like the rock or the what's it called, there's a certain term,
Sim,
stim. This
yeah,
stim, it's all sensory seeking, or the touch themselves, or the scratch. It could be from like an autistic behavior, or it could just be a bit of a nervous disposition. So eating is a sensory thing. So not all emotional eating. That's why I call the book Overeating, rather than why you emotionally eat. It's why you overeat, because underneath the umbrella of overeating, like overeating is the physical act of eating too much food for your body. Within that, there'll be emotional eating. Some of that will be just as simple as, oh, I'm bored, so I'll eat. That, or it could be as complex as someone's going through a deep trauma response right now, and that's just a complete, act of withdrawal. It's a emotionally numbing, like a coping mechanism. Or it literally could be, God, I've had a horrible day at work and my mind's just going crazy, and just that distraction of something in their mouth can just be enough to take them out of their head. So it
yeah,
doesn't always have to be emotional. It could be sensory
yeah,
overeating. So maybe if you said you've experienced, or you maybe struggled with ADHD or undiagnosed, whatever, and you've noticed, like, God, I do sometimes eat when I'm a bit dysregulated or I'm bored, because people who are ADHD, boredom feels like painful. Like when I'm bored, I start creating chaos in my mind and I'm not a good person to be around. That's why
yeah,
I've got to have stimulation.
yeah.
Otherwise, I will just do self-destructive things.
Aye. Yeah, I've noticed that obviously like with my son, he's got like a certain like a handful of different foods that he eats. That's it, like 4 or 5 different meals. And I was the same when I was younger. I lived on chips. That was it. That was all I used to eat: chips, pizzas, stuff like that. So, but I'm a lot better now.
No, that's a good point though. Like, I'll just address that because I know what's actually going on. The trait of having safe foods and only having certain foods that you want to eat and not being willing to try others. That's an anxiety management thing. So anxiety is an emotion around uncertainty. It's where the nervous system won't feel safe for whatever reason. And the thing about the nervous system is it can't take any chances. And what I mean by that is the brain can perceive danger, whether it's a real physical one, like, oh, there's a saber-toothed tiger over there about to eat me, or it's like, oh, I'm worried about something that I can't think about right now. It's just on my mind and I don't know what it is. The nervous system will respond the same. So safety means certainty. Certainty means, well, I really love those foods, so I'm not going to
Yeah,
try anything else. And that becomes
yeah,
sensory seeking behavior itself. It's almost
yeah,
like when people only watch the same TV shows over and over again, and they're very reluctant to watch new ones because they're like, oh, I don't know how that'll make me feel. So I'm not a child psychologist, but I have spoken to people who do a little bit of that, and they explained that to me. The whole the safe foods where children might be very reluctant to eat anything else. It's often about the texture, the taste, but also the uncertainty of, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that is. I'm not willing to try it. So it's an anxiety thing. And if we can manage techniques on that, we can then open the door to other foods, and then through repetition, oh, I quite like that broccoli. It's all right. And then that's another safe food. So you've just got to slowly recognize what that is. I think the worst thing you can do with a child in that moment is like shame them. Oh, you've got to eat that, because if you don't, you'll not grow big and strong. Well, they already feel unsafe in whatever way. That's going to make them feel even more anxious because now they're internalizing it. Oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. I'm letting mum and dad down. So you've got to kind of just notice what it is. Just let them kind of have it, and then recognize that the better they get at learning how to regulate their emotions, which does come through age as well, and then open the door subtly to new foods, eventually they'll trust themselves more. So that's more of an anxiety thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like it how you like me, where you kind of want to know why people like tick, like what makes people tick, why people like think the way that they think. And I've heard you talking about Carl Jung on some podcasts and stuff, and like you've quoted some other like psychologists and Stoics and stuff like that, and I think that's impressive. But it's like I'm into all that sort of stuff as well, but I don't really know much about it. I've heard Jordan Peterson talking about like Carl Jung and stuff, and I've heard him
Yeah.
talking about like the shadow, and I've heard you talking about that. Can you explain what the shadow is?
Yeah, that's just going really deep here. Yeah, so the shadow is essentially the unconscious part of the mind, right? So it's basically all of the suppressed traits, suppressed emotions, suppressed memories that are so painful to accept or acknowledge or even think about that would just push them down. So like an object that's sitting there, right, in the light, well, you'd see that, but behind it there'd be a shadow. But let's say that if I've got a shadow right now, unless I had a camera looking, I'm not aware of the shadow. It's there, it exists, but I'm not seeing it. It's in the unconscious part of my mind because I'm here. My shadow's behind me. You can't see two things at once. So that's why Jung called the unconscious mind the shadow. So it's just a nickname or a whatever pseudonym or whatever you want to call it for the unconscious mind. And that's what drives most of our behaviors. Like our mutual coach Paul talks a lot about this, limiting beliefs, the unconscious mind. I think he's used the analogy of the ant that's on top of the elephant. The elephant's walking one way or the ant's walking one way. That's you towards your goal, but the elephant's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
going there. It's like you cannot outwork your unconscious mind. So basically, it's all of your fears, all of your deepest, darkest insecurities, all of the horrible thoughts that you have. But human nature causes us to suppress it because it's so painful. So Carl Jung's entire psychoanalytical principles, which help heal his, I mean, he's long gone now, he's a 20th century psychologist, but his work was right. When we integrate the shadow, we make the unconscious conscious, you understand why you tick, and it could be like, oh my God, that's why I emotionally eat. I thought I was just greedy. I'm actually anxious and I don't know how else to turn my anxiety off. What's making me anxious? Well, this, oh my God, like I've never even wanted to think about that, but that's true. So if I want to sort my eating habits out, I need to deal with this thing that's making me anxious. That's a subtle, silly example, like a quick example I'll give you of like integrating the shadow. So it's just taking a deeper look into the unconscious mind rather than just like what's on the surface. Oh, I'm overweight and I need to eat better. That's surface level work. Shadow work is like, why? Why am I overeating? Why am I using food for comfort? What's causing me to do it? It'll be some sort of belief, some sort of fear, some sort of avoidance.
yeah. Mad. It is interesting. I've only, like I say, I've only recently started like reading about stuff like that. I read at the beginning of the year, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Great book.
He's obviously a psychologist, and he's got is it the logotherapy or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any other like that you could recommend looking into, or any books that you could recommend on like that you've read that you've learned a lot from? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Jeff Thompson, Dan?
I haven't, no.
So Paul's actually done a podcast with him years
Oh,
ago.
I have. I've listened to the podcast that they put, but it was a long
Right.
time ago. This was probably
Right.
2020, 2021 when I listened to that.
Jeff Thompson, man, like, oh my God, like he's not, I mean, he is intellectual, like he's obviously self-taught, right? But he's not like a research psychologist or whatever, but his story's like absolutely amazing. I don't know if you remember it, but he was like abused as a child, and his way to deal with that, like sexually abused, of course, his way to deal with that was to become this big burly man, and he got to become an expert at martial arts. Like he literally taught Bruce Lee and this and that, so he was like a killer,
I
and
have to go back
he
and listen
worked on the
to that.
doors as well. Like his first book, I think, was called Notes from a Factory Floor, or something like that, or Bouncer or something like that. He was basically a bouncer and used to get in fights and used to be violent but he realized that was his trauma response, his way to face his pain of being an 11-year-old child who was abused was to become this big, strong, horrible, evil man because no one would mess with him, His book, the way he describes his story, is how he'd become to realize that that's what he built as a trauma response and how that had impacted his family and the world and, ruined his marriage. And, it was just like, it brought me to tears, like, honestly. So his work, his life story, his book, it's all about the shadow, all about making the unconscious conscious, how how trauma, he describes trauma as like experiences that we go through where we become impacted by like a parasite. And that parasite is not physical, it's metaphysical, it's made out of energy. And that suppressed emotion that we're too scared to let out, it ends up controlling our personality. And all the behaviors and the beliefs and the way that we live our life, and even the very manifestation of our life, will be because that parasite is still feeding off us unknowingly. You know, trauma's not memories, trauma's stored energy in the body. So his whole work of how to release that parasite, it's very spiritual, very metaphysical, and he's very religious now. And he talks about God and things like that, which I'm kind of leaning more into as I get older. But I think God is just, religion was just the psychology of the day. I think it's all the same stuff anyway, just a different way of explaining it. But yeah, Jeff Thompson, probably the most influential author I've ever studied, and I've devoured his podcasts, I've devoured his books. I must have listened to hundreds of hours of Jeff Thompson speak because I'm like, God, when we talk about the crisis of male masculine mental health work right now, he needs to, he chooses to be a bit more introverted. He's not about the public fame and whatnot. He's very under the radar, but he's the embodiment of what masculinity is, because it's like, I think Jordan Peterson says this, you've got to be like capable of being like not evil, but you've got to be capable of being a strong, brutish, masculine man, but you've also got to know how to control it. I think his exact quote is actually, you're better to be a warrior in a garden than a
Yeah,
gardener in a war.
Gardner in a war. Yeah,
And that's masculinity. And Jeff Thompson shows that. He's been the worst traits of masculinity. And then he's understood why, because he was a wounded 11-year-old boy and he was able to integrate that, totally change his personality and therefore the energy that he radiates. And now he's like sharing that message. It's like, that's both sides. And he's sitting in the center perfectly. So back to Carl Jung's point of like integrating the shadow, he talks about like mental illness as the ability to endure suffering, a bit like Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, the ability to find meaning in suffering. It's like, that's true masculinity. That's true mental health integration, not getting rid of all the negative emotions, understanding why they're necessary, but how it doesn't have to go through you. You don't have to carry on that parasite, that trauma, because hurt people just hurt people. That's what
yeah,
trauma is. A bunch of wounded children who never were able to understand that become adults who then hurt other people. It just gets passed on like this parasite, like a flu, like a
yeah,
virus.
yeah,
So Jeff Thompson, mate, I'm telling you now, if you've not studied him,
yeah.
just
I'll go back
mind
and listen
blowing.
to that one, definitely. It's
Mind blowing.
interesting that you said about the spirituality thing and this deeper sort of stuff. Because I've always been a bit like nihilistic, like growing up and stuff. But like the older I get, it's weird. Like weird things happen, and you just the unexplainable on, and you start to think like the other day. Obviously you messaged us. I'd just been listening to you on a podcast on a plane to Malaga. I landed and I had a message on my phone off you. So I thought I'm gonna have to take advantage of this. I had a couple of other people lined up for
Yeah, I
episodes,
love it.
but I thought that when I got that message, I thought I'm gonna have to take advantage of this and get them straight on. Like so,
That's called synchronicity. That's a Carl
uh,
Jung concept. Have you ever heard of
right?
that?
No, I've
Yeah,
heard of synchronicity. I didn't know it was
yeah.
called Young.
So it can be something silly, like, like everyone would have experiences at some point, right? Because he thinks consciousness is alive. It's almost like the semi-autonomous being that we have. Like, why do we have consciousness and we can think about things, and we can understand each other, and we can have deep thoughts and reflect on our emotions, but other animals can't? They are just like animals. So this consciousness is almost like this higher power. It's often referred to as the God consciousness, right? So imagine consciousness being alive, right? And sometimes we'll go through moments in time where we're so synced up to this like higher level that it's almost like we can manifest things. And it's almost like, yeah, I was just thinking of you yesterday, then I bumped into you randomly in the bookies, or in Asda, and that's like a coincidence. You think, isn't that funny? I was just talking about them. I was just thinking about this song, and then it come on the radio. It's like those moments of synchronicity is when you're actually tapping into a higher level of frequency, and it's almost like a coincidence, but it's not. It's just the universe going, you're on the right path right now, and you're in tune with your higher self. That's what synchronicity is. So anytime I say synchronicity, because it happens frequently with me, little random things like that, I just smile and I go, I'm being guided by the universe right now. Thank you very
Definitely
much. I
something
must be
else.
doing the right things,
Definitely something else going on. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. Manifesting's interesting because I didn't believe in that as well, like a while ago. But there's certain things, like obviously, like with Paul, we've set goals. I've wrote things down, the hot pen technique. Certain things have happened, and I've manifested it. Do you know what I mean? I can't deny that. But it's interesting how, like you say, that I didn't believe in anything like that a few years ago, but now it's starting to become a bit more real.
Yeah. I mean, I was exactly the same as you. You mentioned before, oh, I was a bit nihilistic in my teenage years and this and that. Well, that's what led me to the depth of depression. And I'm just going to be honest, like I talk
Yeah.
about in the book, when I was about 23, like I don't know if I wanted to be here anymore. And I started having those thoughts. I mean, I never acted on them, obviously. I was too afraid, too frightened to, but it didn't mean I didn't have some dark days, in the middle of a panic attack. And one story I mentioned in the book, and I know the day because it'll stick out in my mind. 23rd of March, 2018, I had one of the worst panic attacks ever. I couldn't sleep. I woke up, I was like panicking. I just convinced myself that my life wasn't worth living. And I left the house in a moment of madness. And I walked around the streets like 4:30, 5 in the morning, just like really upset. I just didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. And luckily, I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was going to chuck myself into a bus or something. That was what I was thinking. But I was nowhere near from doing that. I was just so angry. I just didn't understand my emotions, and I was so afraid. I was just afraid of life. But, linking back to Johan Hari, what you mentioned before, I was experiencing all these voids that I wasn't aware of, and there was some unresolved trauma that I wasn't clear of, that I just kind of put down to my mind. And I was also not treating myself very well. I wasn't looking after my body at all. I was abusing my body with substances and all that sort of stuff. And I remember thinking, like, God, like, this is just, it has to be for a reason, And when I finally kind of faced that, I was like, I'm going to do what I was afraid of doing. And I started taking action, and then good things started happening randomly. And I started to believe now, like, God, there's something higher than just me, And I think what led me to being so depressed is because I was like, what's the point in trying? The world's a piece of shit, everyone's and I was just so nihilistic. Well, that's depression talk, So it's not saying I'm like uber religious. I'm not. I think there's a higher power. I don't know what it is, but I'm open to it. And I think once
Yeah.
you cross that mind mentally, like, yeah, there's something bigger than me. Because being nihilistic essentially means that, like, you're being narcissistic as well. You're like, there's nothing out there. I know that there's not. Like, how
Yeah.
narcissistic is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm at least open-minded, And when I became
Yeah. Yeah.
open-minded, I started to see too many coincidences that some people
Yeah.
would label as religious experiences. And I'm like, definitely something out there. So whether it's spirituality or God, I don't know. I think they're probably the same thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Right, Sam. Do you want to explain what led you to write a book about overeating?
Yeah. So as I mentioned previously, Dan, I was a personal trainer. I saw the same clients kind of come back over and over again, lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, gain weight. And I mentioned before, I did have my own disordered eating. I was a bodybuilder. I used to do shows, and I was in shape, and I got in better shape than 99% of the planet. But I would go on these crazy diets, and I would binge compulsively after and gain 30, 40 pounds in a couple of weeks. And I would bounce from being kind of like, overweight a little bit, like muscular, but chubby and a bit like bulky, like a rugby player, to then really, really lean. And my family were concerned about us because I go through like fluctuations, like of like 50 pound in like 8, 9 weeks, and then I'd blow up and shrink down. And, so when I realized, like, right, I don't want to necessarily do personal training anymore, but I still want to help people related to the health, wellness, and eating habits, obviously I became a coach, So this book was like, obviously I wrote it this year, started doing this sort of coaching in 2020. So it's like 5 years worth of experience. So I wanted to create a resource that someone who isn't working with me one-to-one, who doesn't even know I exist, would happen to come across this book and answer that question of why they overeat, So it's just about creating a how-to guide, a resource, a step-by-step plan for how someone can say, like, oh, I've gained an insight into why I overeat and what the possible root causes could be. So my frameworks in there are just through lived experience of my own disordered eating, but also what I've observed from clients. I tell a lot of client success stories, what worked, what didn't work, the true reasons why people overeat, which, like I mentioned before, a lot of it is to do with unresolved trauma, I'm afraid. It really is.
Yeah, it's definitely a book I'm interested in reading. I know a few people over the last 2 or 3 years that have wrote books, and I've bought them just to support them, but like I haven't actually read them. But this one I'm definitely going to get, mate. Where can I get it?
Well, I'll send you one, mate, as a thank you
No,
for
I'll buy
being
it.
on the podcast. But yeah, my website, Sam Gibson. God, I should know this. What is it? Just go to my go to my social medias. It'll be in the bio. I think it's samgibsonlimitless.com/books.
Class. Right, we'll wrap it up, mate, because I'm really struggling tonight. I'm really tired. I've had a busy week. It's a week leading up to Christmas, and I'm finishing off for trying to get all the jobs finished off for Christmas. So it's been a busy one the day, but I'd love to get you back on in a few episodes, mate. I really enjoy listening to you talk, and I'll definitely be getting a copy of your book. Do you want to tell people where they can find you, plug your social media or anything?
Yeah, no, Great conversation, Dan. I could talk if you weren't so tired. I could talk to you for hours because I'm
I
sure I
could.
would
I'd
have
love
so
to pick
many.
your brain. I've like I say, I've heard you on
Definitely.
a few podcasts recently, and I love like some of the stuff that you talk about. We haven't even touched on George Orwell, but we'll get onto that next time.
A part two is coming up, mate. We'll say we're
Class,
manifesting it, right? We've manifested a part two. It'll happen, some point in the new year. But
class.
yeah, where to find me? Well, Facebook is Sam Gibson Emotional Eating Coach. Instagram is Sam Gibson Limitless. That's the two social media channels. I mean, I am on TikTok, but I'm not going to lie. I pay someone to run that for me because I think
See,
TikTok is the absolute pits. So I do post some content on there, but I literally just send them videos. I've got no idea how many followers I've got, who messages me. It's just a place where I post. And then YouTube is Sam Gibson Emotional Eating Coach. My personal goal for 26, like you, because I know you've been doing a bit of vlogging and whatnot, is to do more YouTube videos. I really want to start doing more content on there because I think I've got a lot of good things to say, a lot of different things to say. And social media is just a bit like, well, the algorithm kind of, unless you're kind of posting entertaining stuff, you don't really get seen. So I want to do a bit more niche stuff on YouTube and kind of direct people towards that, which is a little bit less noisy than social media these days. So Facebook and Instagram is where to find me as far as if you want to connect. But YouTube is definitely somewhere I'm going to be posting more on in the future.
class. Well, I hope people look you up, and I hope a couple of people listening might be sent your way as clients, because obviously, as you can tell, if you're listening to it, Sam Nazi stuff. So, Jazz, thanks again for doing it, mate. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Pleasure, mate.
Thank you.